Tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time.
Welcome, everyone. It is afternoon tea time. That's right, Miss Liz is back, and today I have an incredible guest in the house. I have Dr. Ed Daube, who will be talking about emotions. That's right, Dr. Emotions is in the house. So today it's going to be a good, deep conversation. So before we get started, we're going to do the disclaimer, and then I'll give the little intro of who Dr. Ed Daube is. And I hope I'm saying his last name right. If not, he'll pronounce it when he comes out. But again, today's conversation may trigger some and it might open some doors. So be sure to leave your comments, questions, and all of that in the comment section and that. So Miss Liz's disclaimer for my live shows. Miss Liz, myself, is going live using StreamYard.com. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to use your name. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any tea time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith, however, may bring forth dialogue and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the given point and given time of airing, and all tea time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussion for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that this show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not a therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about this disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in this show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. Should you decide that this show is not made for you at this time, I respect that wish and I will see you at a later show at a later date. Now, I'm going to bring in my incredible guest, Dr. Ed Daube, or I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, so I'm going to bring him in so he can correct me. Ed, am I saying it right?
Actually, it's Daube.
Daube. Oh, I wouldn't have even I wasn't even close to it.
Well, that's not too bad. It's been mispronounced in so many different ways, I can hardly tell you. So that's not too bad.
I think it's my French tongue that kicks in and wants to say the French kind of way, cut the letters and all that. So,
right.
So Ed, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit. And if anybody would like to see Ed's full bio, please check out Miss Liz's Tea Time Facebook page and LinkedIn page. All of his information is there, and we will have a deep discussion. I really want to get into our discussion today because we have a lot to talk about. So Ed, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners right now.
Well, first of all, Liz, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Well, my name is Ed Daube, and I call myself the Emotions Doctor. And I've been retired now for about, probably 17 years. I worked with young men and young women in a juvenile correction facility here in California. And when I retired, and we'll get into more of this in our discussion here, when I retired, I decided that while my primary goal is to be retired, and I don't work and I don't have a private practice, but my mission in retirement has been to educate people about what their emotions are, why they have them, and how to strategically deploy them as tools. And I've chosen this as my mission because there's so much misinformation out there that people feel that their emotions control them. They don't, and they want to avoid their emotions. They shouldn't. And again, we'll talk about this, but my goal in retirement has been to educate people so that their emotions become tools that they can use to improve their lives and their relationships. And I'm looking forward to discussing all of that.
Well, we really had a good conversation just before the show started. That I always have that icebreaker in the back with all of my guests and that. And me and Ed were talking about a lot of things. So I'm going to really be hitting Ed with a lot of deep questions. Good. So for Ed, I want to really get into the questions of the women. We talked about this a little bit in the back. So if you check out Ed's bio on Miss Liz's Facebook page, you will see that Ed works with women. And I wanted to know why women and not men when it came to emotions.
Well, when I first started at the Youth Authority, I was put on a unit where I had to deal with young women, all of whom had committed serious crimes in California, and all of whom had serious issues with their emotions. They either acted out on their emotions and hurt others, or they acted in and hurt themselves. So here I was just out of graduate school. It's the first job I ever had. And I had to learn how to talk to these women. My language as a psychologist was up here, and their language down here, without many of them didn't have a high school degree. And I had to learn how to bridge that gap. First of all, I had to show them that I, as a man, had some idea what was going on with them. And then that what I had to say would be helpful to them. So I developed the emotions as tools model in order to help them understand what emotions were. I also had to deal with emotionally jaded correctional staff and help them understand A, their own emotions, and B, the emotions of the young women that they had to deal with. And they weren't very good at it either. So I had to help these young women understand that, well, I'm not a woman, and I never was, but I had to tell them that they needed to help me understand them so that I could help them understand themselves and grow through therapy. So that was, most of my career was with young women. Now I worked with young men as well, but most of it was with young women. When I retired, I went on to a LinkedIn forum, and it was a women's forum. And I specifically said to them, look, I'm a man, but I want to understand what it means for you as women to express your anger, because I had become interested in anger with the idea that there was a lot of misinformation out there about anger. And you read articles all the time about men who say, well, my anger made me do this, my anger made me do that. And I was curious from a woman's point of view. I got 2,000 responses, Liz, and what they basically said was, when I as a woman express anger, I'm marginalized, I'm demeaned, I'm labeled, I'm ignored. And so I decided that I needed to address that, which is what I did. And I put a chapter of it in my second book. I wrote my first book, by the way, in order to clarify what emotions were, why we had them, and how to use them. My second book was on anger specifically. So that's how I got involved with women and women's anger. I'm not an expert on women's anger, but I know enough that I can be informative in helping women understand what anger is and how they should embrace their anger and utilize it to improve their situations. It's not always obvious how to do that, but it's doable.
Well, and we talked about that in the back room also about anger management, right? I like I said, I've done it 4 times, and each time it tells me the same thing. I'm a bottler. I hold and hold and hold, and then I blow the littlest thing, right? And we were talking about how it doesn't work. Could you explain to the viewers and listeners how it doesn't work?
Yes. Now, there is a very good anger management program out there, by the way. It's by Anderson and Anderson. But most of them don't work, and here's the reason why. What they do, anger management programs, is they tell you that you need to control your anger. And that doesn't work. It's like you bottle it up and then it explodes. They don't tell you what anger is as an emotion, which I will explain, and they don't tell you how to use it. The message is you need to control it. You need to not express it. And I disagree with that message for 2 reasons. First of all, it doesn't work over time, because when you go through an anger management program, what you basically say is, well, that sounds good, but it doesn't work for me. What else do you got? And the second reason is it doesn't enable you to utilize your anger as a tool to make your life better. And that's why I think where anger management programs miss the mark. They don't address what anger is, what all emotions are, and tell you how to utilize that. That would be like me saying to you, okay, you know what? I'm giving you this new sewing machine, or I'm giving you this new cell phone. Here it is. It makes calls. Go get them. It's like, well, what do I do with it? How do I make it do this? How do I make it do that? How do I make that phone a tool that I can use to help me? And that's where anger management courses fall short. Does that make sense?
That does make sense to me. And I like that you brought up the cell phone, right? Because it's like if we give a kid a cell phone and we just say, here's a phone, but they don't actually understand what the phone does with it, right? And this
Yes.
is why we have so much issues with cell phones and social media and kids not understanding the damage that can be done because they don't understand the product itself. So
Yes.
and this is where you're coming in and saying we don't understand the product of our anger because we're just being told just control it, just put it over, you know.
That's exactly correct. And see, what the anger management programs miss is explaining the emotion cycle. Let me kind of put that into context for you. We are, when we lived in caves back then, we didn't have sharp teeth and we didn't have sharp claws. All we had was our brain and our emotions. So emotions evolved as early threat warning systems to both alert us to and prepare us to deal with threats as we came upon them. Now, back then, all threats were physical. They were survival-based threats, and they would, in fact, kill us. Today, most of our threats are psychological. So here's how it works. All of us are constantly scanning our surroundings for threat. We're born with that. I have a 1-year-old grandson, and you can see the emotions developing in him. The primary emotions are mad, sad, glad, fear, disgust, and surprise. So you can see those develop in my young grandson. So as we become adults, we have these emotions and they're there. So we're constantly assessing our surroundings for threat. When we perceive a threat, we subconsciously, our body is prepared to deal with that threat. This happens through the amygdala. Your listeners have probably heard of that. It's a part of the emotional part of the brain. The amygdala says, okay, I see a threat. I'm going to prepare you to deal with that threat. Once that happens now, the next part of the cycle is where the cerebral cortex kicks in. And this is where we now have the ability to master our emotions as tools. And what happens there is once we become aware of the emotion, we need to, and this is where control comes in, by the way, because there is a where you need control, but you're not controlling the emotion. You're controlling your response to that emotion. And you do that by taking a deep breath, which lowers your arousal level, and you take a physical step back from the threat or from the emotion. Again, you're not controlling the emotion, and this is also where anger management courses fall short. They're telling you to control the emotion. Very difficult to do, and impossible over time. So now, once you take a physical step back and a deep breath or two, you now are in a position to assess the nature of the threat. What is actually going on? What am I facing? How real is the threat? Is it a valid threat? Have I misunderstood something? Once you make that assessment, now you're in a position to choose your response. So again, where the anger management groups fall short is they're telling you to control the emotion. When I'm talking about the anger mastery cycle, I'm saying accept the emotion because it's always valid and real for you. It's not necessarily appropriate to the situation, but it's always valid and it's always real because it's your emotion and it's your perception. Once you control your response, in other words, if you're getting angry, you don't go and hit a person. You step back, take a breath, and say, what's going on? And if there is a real threat, then you make a plan and choose your response. Now, what I suggested to these women, professional women, was that they don't express their anger, and here's why. In our culture, there are what's called display rules. Maybe a little bit different in Canada, I'm not sure, but The display rule says this is what's appropriate for a man to show, and this is what's appropriate for a woman to show. So if it's not appropriate for a woman to show, appropriate as culturally described or as described by the culture in your office or in the setting in which you work, you don't display the anger, but you keep the anger and you hold on to it. And here's what you do with it. You use the energy of that anger to develop a plan whereby you can confront the person who has perhaps stolen your work or said something inappropriate, whatever it happens to be, but you do it indirectly. So you're still keeping your anger and you're utilizing the energy of that anger to deal with the threat, but you're just not doing it directly. Now, see, each emotion has a message, and it's the message of the emotion that you need to understand in order to be able to make sense of the emotion. The message of anger is, I perceive a threat that I am stronger than and that I can overpower if I go to war with it. Anger prepares you to go to war. Now, again, there are different kinds of war. There's an active war. There's a more passive kind of war, depending on what you can do as a woman or as a man. The message of sadness is, I've lost something very important to me. I need to take a step back. I need to shut down. I need to heal. The message of anxiety is, there's a future event, and that future event may hurt me. So, if that future event is indeed a threat to me, then I need to be prepared to take some action to deal with that possible threat. What my students do is they use their anxiety as called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. And eustress says, okay, what do I need to do? I need to study. I need to prepare for that interview, whatever it happens to be. The challenge with anxiety, as probably your viewers will understand, is that most people experience anxiety as distress, D-I-S-S-T-R-E-S-S. And distress is immobilizing. Distress looks like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I've got this interview coming up, and how am I going to handle that? And if I don't do the right thing, and so forth. So that's distress. But if you understand anxiety, you can utilize anxiety as a strategic tool. And what I mean by that is, you take the emotion and you apply it very specifically or strategically to your situation to help you deal with that situation. I don't know if I went too fast or if it's too much information, but that's how it all fits together.
Well, and that's why we have replay, right? We can listen to this tea time over and over again. So if Ed is going a little too fast for the viewers out there and listeners out there, you can always rewind and rewatch and replay. I'm getting a lot from this, Ed, because I'm understanding that a lot of our emotions is a time for us to actually step back and look at.
Yes.
You know,
every emotion, I want your listeners and viewers to think about first when you experience the emotion. And that, by the way, takes some practice because each of us may experience our emotion differently. Let me give you an example of how it all works. A few years ago, when I was working and teaching out at a local university, I left my office and I'm driving to my classroom and my stomach begins to churn. Now, for me, my churning stomach signifies anxiety. That's how I experience anxiety. Other people might experience it differently. So I pulled over for a minute and I went through in my head a mental checklist. Okay, is everything okay at work? Yeah. Everything okay at home? Yeah. Everything okay with my notes for my class? Yeah. Once I decided that whatever was going on in my stomach wasn't anxiety, I let it go. Now, who knows? It might have been gas for all I know. But the point is, once I ignored it, it went away. Now, the point here is, I didn't want to ignore the sign that could very well have been anxiety because it might have been telling me something. It might have been saying to me, you know, Ed, you did not lock your desk when you left your office. So make sure that however that's covered, or you didn't call home or whatever it was. If that were the case, my anxiety would have been giving me a significant warning to take some action. As it was for me, everything was covered and I just let it go. Now, there's another concept here that people get hung up with anxiety, and that's called catastrophizing. Catastrophizing happens when I go to the worst possible outcome of the situation and I act as if that's the only possible outcome. I'll give you an example. When I was in college, there was a guy who jumped off of a building. He survived, but they asked him, they said, "Why did you jump off the building?" And his answer was, "Well, I got a bad grade in my organic chemistry class. That's a fact." But then he concluded, since I got a bad grade, and follow the logic here, since I got a bad grade in my chemistry class, I won't be able to get into medical school. If I can't get into medical school, I won't be able to become a medical doctor. If I can't become a medical doctor, I won't be able to provide for my family. If I can't provide for my family, then I'm a failure. And if I'm a failure, I might as well jump off a building. Now, there is a very small thread of logic to each of those steps. The challenge is it ignores a whole bunch of other ways to look at the situation. And that's catastrophizing. And when we use anxiety as distress, we can often get caught in that emotional loop and it'll tear us apart.
Well, it's almost like a building block. As you were mentioning, can't do this, can't do that, can't. The can'ts just keep increasing.
Yes, and that's exactly it. Now, a better way, if he were mastering his anxiety, he would have said, "Okay, I got a D in my organic chemistry class. That's not good. What are my options here? I can retake the class. I can choose a different profession, whatever it happens to be." But he would then have looked at his options instead of getting into an emotional maelstrom.
Well, he didn't take that moment to step back.
No, he didn't.
And that's where he went higher and higher and higher into the distress.
That's exactly correct. So,
which makes a lot of sense.
It does. So what I teach people is that when practice, when you experience an emotion, taking a physical step back and taking a deep breath. Now you might say, "Come on, Ed, that's kind of silly. If I'm surprised or I'm happy, why would I want to do that?" You don't have to. But you're building in a new habit. And a habit takes time to learn and to build in. And the habit is, I experience the emotion, I take a physical step back, and I take a deep breath. So that if you build in that habit, when you get angry or you're feeling guilty about something, you will automatically take a physical step back, take a deep breath, and then assess what's actually going on.
So I want to ask you a question, Ed, because for me, it confuses me. Is feelings and emotions connected, or are they completely different?
No, it's a very good question. In the literature, the scientific writers distinguish an emotion which exists over a longer period of time versus a feeling. But for the general public, they're the same. And you don't need to get involved in what the difference is. Scientifically, there's a difference. Practically, there is none.
Okay.
So you can talk about an emotion, you can talk about a feeling, it's the same. When I write on my blog, theemotionsdoctor.com, I use them interchangeably.
Okay. So are they like almost like cousins?
They're basically the same.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The feeling may be more of the cognitive part of it. The emotion may be more of the physical part of it. But
okay. That makes more sense to me. Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, they're basically the same. They are the same.
So I want to get now into a little bit more on your books, Ed, because you've written, I believe there's a few books here, 2 books here. So what got you started with the first book?
Well, the first book, which is Emotions as Tools.
Oh, awesome. You have the books here.
Yep. Self-Help Guide to Controlling Your Life, Not Your Feelings. That came about shortly after I retired. And my idea then was, as I said earlier, that I wanted to educate people about emotions because there just was so much misinformation out there. And I felt that I had a unique approach to dealing with emotions that nobody else was doing. And because I had learned how to communicate what emotions are, that I needed to take that skill and write a book so that it would give people access to that information. So that's why I wrote the first book. The first book goes into the model, the emotions model, which I talked about, and how to deal with specific emotions. There's also a checklist in there, by the way, so that you can begin to learn about your body and where you experience emotions. Do you experience emotions in your forehead? Does it heat up? Do you experience emotions in somewhere in your face? Do you experience emotions in shoulders tightening? These are physical ways that each of us experiences emotions. I mentioned earlier anxiety for me in my stomach. Perhaps there's a tightening of the whole body when you experience the emotion, but you need to learn to distinguish that and what it's telling you about what you're feeling, so you then can look at the message of the emotion and assess your situation and then make a plan of action. Now, I want everybody watching this to understand, because this is critical. When you start down that road to mastering your emotions, it's not going to be easy. However, it is doable. And if you find yourself saying, oh, I can't do that, or that's hard, let me give you a little hint here. When you say something to yourself like, that's hard or that's difficult, what your brain hears is, that's impossible. I can't do that. So catch the language here now. When you're facing a challenge, a task that's a challenge for you, what you say to yourself is, man, that is difficult. That is hard to do, but it is doable. So now what your brain hears is validating the challenge, but also telling yourself that if you stay with it, you can overcome it. But you need to practice what I'm saying to you about taking a deep breath, taking a step back, and then assessing the situation and then choosing your response. That's how you master an emotion. And when you do that, your emotions become your friends.
And that makes a lot of sense, Ed. It does, because we don't take the time to step back, and we don't take the time to really catch the language that we're talking to ourselves. So again, it's take that step, take a moment before we tell ourselves these things, right?
Right. And see, what people tend to do, which is why I wrote my books, is if you think of your smoke detector in your house, most of the time the smoke detector is just there. But sometimes, not with the newer ones, but with the older ones, it'll start sounding an alarm, like in the middle of the night, or even if you burn the toast and the smoke detector is going off. And the smoke detector is annoying. So what some people have done in the past is they pull the smoke detector down and pull the battery. Now that stops the signal, but then the house burns down. And we don't see it so much now, but with the older ones, well, that's the equivalent of saying, you know what? I'm experiencing anger, or I'm experiencing anxiety or sadness, and I don't like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and ignore the emotion or control it and push it down. It doesn't work.
Oh, I want to ask you a question, Ed. You mentioned the fire alarms, the beeping, the sounds. Why do beeping sounds or a constant pattern cause anger in people?
Oh, they don't, by the way, Liz. They don't cause the anger.
Oh, okay.
And here's why, or here's what I'm trying to say. If the smoke detector caused something in you, what you're saying there is that piece of machinery can somehow, across time and space, make you do something that it doesn't. And in the same way, if somebody says to you, well, you make me mad, no, they don't. Now, what they and the smoke detector do is they create a situation that elicits, that brings out the anger in you, but does not cause it. All of us cause our own emotions based on how we perceive our situation. So in the case of the smoke detector, if I'm trying to eat my breakfast quickly and get out and go to work, and this smoke detector is going off, and I'm trying to make a phone call at the same time I'm trying to eat my breakfast. Now, I'm in a situation where I'm frustrated. I'm trying to make a phone call, and this damn smoke detector is making it impossible for me to do that. So I'm getting angry because I perceive the smoke detector as a threat to my achieving my goal of wanting to make my phone call, eat my breakfast, and get out of the darn house. So it's a perception of threat that leads to the anger.
Wow.
If that smoke detector goes off at 3 a.m. and there's no smoke, now that smoke detector is a threat to my getting my sleep. It was a situation in my own house a few days ago. I bought smoke detectors and I put them all throughout the house. You can see one right up there in the room.
Yeah, right there. You're right above the door.
Right above the door. And they come with a 10-year warranty on it. Well, I'd had the smoke detector for about 5 years, and the smoke detector went off at like 3 a.m. Woke me up. So I went downstairs, and it was in my pantry between my living room and the garage, and I have another room just off the pantry. So I looked, and there was no smoke. There was nothing. The smoke detector was bad. So in that case, I took the smoke detector down, and I deactivated it. And then the company replaced it, which was nice, but that's another issue. The point here is, if that were an emotion, I can say I experienced the emotion. The smoke detector warned me. I went down, I assessed the situation, and I decided there really was no threat. Now, that smoke detector could have been telling me that there was smoke coming in from my garage, in which case I'd been a happy camper with a smoke detector, not with a fire, but
Yeah.
it would have alerted me. But there was no threat. So I deactivated the smoke detector. Or you can deactivate the emotion by simply saying, there's no threat here, I'm going to ignore it, and it'll go away. But you don't want to make the mistake of ignoring the emotion just because it's annoying without assessing the nature of the threat. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I think we're so fast to just go into rage, right? Like go into anger right away without assessing the situation. And it all has to come back to that stepping back again, taking a moment,
Yes. Now, if you have normal here, and then you perceive a threat, which is your anger here, rage is up here. Rage basically says, not only am I going to take on the threat, but I'm going to apply as much force as I can in order to eliminate it. That's what rage is. So if instead of using conventional weapons in a war, I go nuclear, that's the difference between anger, which will be your conventional weapons, and dropping a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. So what causes the human mind to go into rage? Is it not taking that moment to step back and just going completely boom, 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 boom up those steps?
That's exactly what it is. Or maybe what it is you're carrying around a lot of anger inside of you and you're already here. And then something else happens and you immediately go up here.
Okay.
So let's say I'm driving around and I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off at my wife. I'm pissed off at my kids. Whatever I'm pissed off at, right? And now I'm here and I'm driving around and you pull in front of me. And now I go into road rage and I'm pulling out my gun and I'm shooting people.
Yeah.
So if you're carrying around a lot of anger, you or any of your viewers, you need to really take a look at that. What is it you're holding on to? How have you handled threat in the past? Do you have a history of abuse which you felt incapable of doing anything about, and you're still pissed off at your abuser? So you're holding on to this anger. You're setting yourself up for rage. Now, one of the things that was a real challenge for me when I was working with these young women was that they had real issues with abuse, and they hated their abuser, and they were angry with their abuser. And you might say, well, but Ed, doesn't that make total sense? Yeah, it does. However, what was missing is this. If you're holding on to anger at an abuser, then you are attached psychologically to that abuser. And everywhere you go, you take that abuser with you. So what I needed to help them understand was they needed to learn to forgive. Let me explain what that means. Because when I said that to them, I said, well, you need to forgive your abuser. And they said, why? They hurt me. They damaged me. Why would I want to forgive them? And here's what I explained to them. The task of forgiveness has nothing, let me repeat that, nothing to do with the person you are forgiving. What it has to do with is you. When you forgive somebody, what you're saying is, what you did to me was horrible, and you may be a horrible person. But that's on you. When I forgive you, I am saying, I am letting you go. I'm detaching myself from you emotionally. You can go pound sand for all I care, or drive off a cliff. Doesn't matter to me. Because now I am, with my forgiveness, I am moving on. I'm taking care of me. And once they learn to forgive, then we could focus on helping them understand themselves and growing psychologically and therapeutically.
And you really need to learn to forgive for you, not for them.
Yes.
You know, because there's a big difference. A lot of people are like, well, you have to forgive for them. No, you don't. Like I tell my children, because I'm a survivor of extreme abuse, I forgave them a long time ago so I can move forward in my life, because I didn't want to carry that baggage with me everywhere I was going. And that doesn't mean I have to have them for Sunday dinner anymore. I forgave them. All the best to you. It is gone. I've cut that cord, you know, and that's how I was able to heal and move forward. But for years I held on to that anger, Ed, and I was like, no, how dare you guys? You did this to me, like you know. And I was carrying that baggage with me for around, and I was like, I just can't get rid of these people. I can't get rid of this hate, this rage in me. And I said, you know what? I broke down in the middle of the night, and I just said, you know what? I forgive you. I release all of you guys. Like I just need to move forward. I need for my life to move forward, you know? And a lot of people, because I suffer from mental health, they're like, well, Liz, you haven't forgiven yet. Yes, I have.
Yes.
That is another issue. That is the mental chemical brain function. That has nothing to do with the abusers. That has nothing to do with any of the things that have happened to me. That is my chemicals in my brain that they're just saying, Miss Liz, right now, you're just going to be emotional. You're going to be, you know, it's up and down. Yep. And this is why I really wanted you on the show, Ed, was because I wanted to understand my feelings and my emotions as well, because I'm a roller coaster. Some days I'm up, I'm down, but I've learned to take that moment to step back. Why am I feeling this way? Why do I feel that I need to cry right now? Why do I feel like I'm upset? I'm angry right now. You know, and before the show, we were talking about this. I said, maybe it's mental health, maybe it's menopause. I'm in that age range, you know, but there's always that moment where you have to take a moment and just step back and say, and get into the emotion and understand the emotion.
Yes.
And if we don't take that time in that moment, we're never going to heal. It's like I said, I did 4 anger managements, and every time I left, I was like, you guys are telling me all the same stuff over and over again. You're giving me a certificate that I passed anger management, but I'm still angry. What's going on here?
Yep. Well, you know? let me make a suggestion to you, Liz. And it has to do with the word why. And the general principle here is that when you ask a why question, you assume that there's an answer to a why question, but very often the issue that you're questioning has multiple answers to it. And so why won't necessarily do it. If I ask my kids, well, they're all adults now, but when they were younger, if I said why, they would give me an excuse. So I'm suggesting, I mean, you can ask it because you understand what you're asking, but a better question to ask would be what? What is going on that I'm experiencing anger? Because what then will focus you on your situation rather than on some reason to explain the emotion. Because in your case, it could be you perceive threat. It could be something chemical in your brain. Who knows? But when you ask the question, what is going on? Now your brain looks for what's happening in that situation that might be eliciting the anger. And if the answer is, well, nothing, then maybe it is just biochemical. And if it is, you can choose to experience it, move past it, however you want to deal with it. But it also might say, well, you know what? I'm angry because this person is a threat to me. They cut in front of me in line. They took my work, my work, they, whatever it happens to be. So when you ask what, that will focus your brain on the information you really want to have.
That actually makes more sense, because when we're asking the why, we never really get an answer, right? We get the excuse.
Exactly.
I like the way that you express that, because that's exactly how I am with my kids. When I say, why do you guys do that? And they're like, well, mom, da, da, da. And I'm like, seriously, you guys are adults now. Like, stop with the excuses. Just do it. Like, you
Right.
know, but it does make sense to ask the what instead of the why.
And you can say, and this is what I would say to my kids, what is your reason that you did that? What were you thinking? What did you hope to accomplish with that? And so when you focus on what, then you're going to get the information you're looking for, which is the basis for the decision they made, which led to the stupid behavior they did.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And like I said, I would get a lot of things from today's tea. Now, you also wrote a self-help book, and we were talking about self-help before we came live, on how some self-help books actually help and some don't. Could you get into that a little bit with the viewers and listeners?
Yes. The challenge with many self-help books is they may give you explanations, but they don't tell you what you need to do to implement those suggestions. Or they'll give you suggestions that it's just not possible for you to do. So if you're reading a self-help book and you're saying to yourself, wow, that makes total sense, but what do I do now? Then that's not a very good self-help book.
Yeah. And there are some out there like that.
Yes, there are. What I tried to do is I tried to say, look, here's the principle behind the issue I'm discussing. This is what emotions are. This is what they tell you. Now, the next step is, how do you implement this information in your own lives? Here's what you need to do. Here's your first step. Here's your second step. Here's your third step. And that's what a good self-help book should do. So when you're reading a self-help book, you want to ask yourself, the question is, okay, once the author has helped me understand the principle, now tell me what I need to do to implement it.
And that's why you wrote the self-help book.
And that's why I wrote the two self-help books, The Emotions as Tools and also Master Your Anger as a Strategic Tool.
Well, you have a self-help guide here, Controlling Your Life, Not Your Feelings.
Yes, that's the first book.
That's the first one. Okay. And then the second
book is Beyond Anger Management.
Yes, that's the one that I have on your poster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's Master Your Anger as a Strategic Tool. So what I had to explain here was the concept of what emotional mastery is, and then the idea of a strategic tool, because those are not something you normally hear. You don't hear anger mastery, you hear anger management.
Yeah.
And management implies control. And as we talked about earlier, I'm not suggesting you control your emotions. I'm suggesting you master your emotions. Now, let's take a look at a car. When you get into your car, do you manage that car and control it, or do you master it? It's a trick question. You basically do both. And what I mean here is this. You need to control the car in terms of its speed and so forth. But when you're mastering a car, you're aware of what the car can do, you're aware of the car's capabilities, and you're utilizing that car to get you from point A to point B. And you're mastering it. You're mastering the speed, you're mastering the steering, you're putting all that together, so you're utilizing the car as a tool. Now, you can control it. If you need to stop quickly, then you're controlling it.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, wait a minute, aren't I controlling it when I'm steering it? Yeah, you could. So don't get too far into the example, but understand the difference between absolute control, which would be stopping the car or flooring it, and mastering it, so that when you're utilizing everything the car can do, so your trip gets you to where you want to go. Now, that might include turning on the air conditioning so you're comfortable inside your car. The speed, all of that goes into mastering it as a tool. So when you master your emotion, you're dealing with all aspects of that emotion so that it works for you, not necessarily against you.
That makes actually sense.
Mm-hmm.
It does. Because it's like you said, right? In the anger management, they want us to control our emotions.
Yep.
But if we don't understand our emotions and we don't take that time to step back to
Mhm.
understand why we're feeling this way, how can we solve it? How can we fix it, right?
Exactly. And in all your 4 groups, Liz, at any point did anybody attempt to explain to you what anger was?
No,
No. Or why you had it?
no,
Or how it developed?
no.
No. So you see, you have no context. You have no context in which to understand the anger that they're telling you need to control. And the problem with that is this: if you don't have a context, 2 things happen. First of all, you don't give much credibility to the information in the first place because it doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't fit with anything. So it's
Yeah.
like, why are you telling me this? What good is it? And then secondly, it doesn't give you anywhere to go from what they've told you. It's like, okay, here's this anger, control it. Well, how come? Why? What is it?
Yeah, it
What is
doesn't have any logic. Like, you're
does it
not
have
telling
logic?
me,
Exactly correct.
right? There's no logic. You're just wasting air. You're just wasting time. For me, that's how I feel. I feel like if you can't give me the content that I need in order to understand it, then I'm wasting my time. And then
Yes.
if you're just giving me a fancy certificate because I came to 8 weeks of anger management, but I left and I already know I'm a bottler, I hold and hold and hold and blow. And then you're going to tell me in 3 months, do another one, give me another pretty little certificate and tell me that I passed. What did I actually pass if I still don't understand the anger?
That's exactly correct. And see, the other thing is too is they need to give you enough information so that you can apply the understanding of what anger is to how you choose to deal with it, which is to bottle it up. Now, the question would be for you is, what is it about expressing anger leads you to hold it in rather than express it? Because you're bottling it. So
Yeah.
there must be something that's going on. And I'm not asking you, to explain it here, but that would be the question I would ask. I would say, if you're bottling it up, then there's something inside of you which says it's not safe, it's not healthy, it's not appropriate for me to express the anger, or I just don't know how to do it. So I don't want to get rid of my anger because my anger is legitimate, so I'll keep it inside. The challenge then, if you keep it inside, you leave yourself open to exploding and going into rage. So it's far better to express that, even if it's only in a very mild way, so that it doesn't bottle up. And to assess, well, is there a legitimate reason for me to be holding on to this anger? Or can I let it go because whatever I was angry at has been resolved, is no longer here, or whatever it happens to be? And those are the kind of questions you can ask about your anger. And my guess is that once you do that, a lot of that emotional energy will begin to subside.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I know why I bottler. Like I know why I bottle, because when things don't make logical sense or common sense to me, I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna put it in the bottle. Like, I'm not even gonna go any further with this situation. I'm not gonna go any further with this person. I'm just gonna bottle, and then the next time it'll come, and then it just bottles and then bottles and bottles. I'm a very person that likes to understand. Show me, give me the results, give me the research that I can check into. I can understand a little bit more. Give me the content. But if you're not giving me content, you're just giving me excuses. You're giving me the why. I'm just gonna bottle, and then Miss Liz is just gonna blow.
Yeah. Let me give you something that I've written about, but I call it the basic behavioral rule. And it's a way that I explain how to understand both yourself and another person that you're trying to deal with. And the basic behavioral rule goes like this: everybody, including us, in every situation, does the best they can, not the best possible, but the best they can, given 2 things. One, their model of the world, and their model includes how they view what's going on, their past history, whatever they bring to the situation in terms of how they're viewing what's happening between you and them, or with you. So everybody does the best they can given their model of the world and their skill sets. What kind of skills do they bring to it? Their communication skills, their interpersonal skills. Now, if you understand that, it doesn't justify anybody's behavior, but it helps you understand that. So if somebody's doing something stupid, Is it because they don't understand what's going on, that is their model, or they just don't know how to deal with the situation, that is their skill sets? So if you understand that, it doesn't mean you have to do anything with it. You may say, you know what, this person is doing the best they can. What they're doing is still
They're
stupid
choosing.
or childish, but that's who they are. So if I want to interact with them, do I need to change their model or help them change their model, or do I need to help them develop new skills? But it gives you a key for interacting with other people who you might otherwise see as a threat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I really want to thank you, Ed, for taking that time to explain that to me, because I like I've told the 4 Angerman classes that I've taken, I know why I bottle. When things don't make sense to me as a person, not it might make sense to somebody else, but when it doesn't make sense to me, then I start to get angry. And I'm just like, explain it to me. But if you're just going to tell me, just do it, I'm just like, but I don't. And it's that threat, right?
That's the threat.
Right there.
Liz, what's the threat there? What's the threat? Do you know? Can you verbalize it for me?
Well, the threat is it gonna hurt me? Is it gonna cause me harm if I do this? I don't know the outcome.
Well, the threat is also, I'm asking for an explanation and you're not giving it to me. You're denying me that explanation. Well, they may not be denying it to you. They may not know it.
Which makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So if they don't know it, there's no point in getting angry with them, because they can't give you what they don't have. So in that case, it's like you have to step back and ask a different question. And if they can't answer your question, find it somewhere else.
Now that actually makes a lot of sense.
And if the threat is that somebody may hurt you, then that's kind of getting angry as a prevention. And I would look at that in terms of, I would look at it as anxiety, that there may be a threat rather than that there is a threat. And when you do that, now you're experiencing anxiety instead of anger. You're not going to bottle up your anxiety, and you always have your anger in reserve should you need it.
That makes. Thank you so much, Ed. Like, you really, and you said it before we started the show. You said, Miss Liz, you're going to understand your emotions when I'm done with you, and that's exactly what you're doing. But before we wrap up your tea time, because time is just passing by really fast here, I want to get into what is your tea, Ed.
Okay. My tea in retirement is to think about your emotions as tools. Emotions, as tools. Because when you begin to think of your emotions as tools, you set yourself up to look for and discover ways to master your emotions. When you think about your emotions as tools and you look for ways to master your emotions, then you are in a position where your emotions work for you, makes you a stronger person, it empowers you, and it makes you more effective in dealing with yourself and others. Now, in order to get information, there's several places you can do that. One, of course, is my books that are available on Amazon. Another resource that I want your viewers to know about is my blog, which you have it there listed, theemotionsdoctor.com. I have over 200 posts dealing with anger, dealing with emotions, all different angles, all emotions, or most emotions, relationships, and so forth. When you go to that website, you want to go to the upper left-hand corner of the homepage, and there is an index tab. When you click on that index tab, it gives you a pull-down menu, which gives you access to all of my posts by category, and then by the post. You click on that post, it takes you directly to the post. No scrolling. So go to the index tab first. And so there's a lot of important information on there. And so if you want to educate yourself, which is what I attempt to do with my blog and my books, the books are available on Amazon. The blog is available at theemotionsdoctor.com.
So if anybody wanted to reach you, Ed, how could they reach you?
Well, my email is theemotionsdoctor@gmail.com.
Okay, and For all of the listeners that are listening to today's show, if you are watching replay, please push hashtag replay. If you're watching lively, I'm live right now. I'd like to know where you're watching from. Also, if you would like to know more about Ed, check out his website, check out his books. They are on Amazon. I have everything in the description. So for the audio listeners, everything will be in the description. So you'll be able to find Ed that way. For all of the people that are watching the video, you can find it on the YouTube channel or on multiple platforms on Miss Liz. Just Google Miss Liz and you'll find all of the tea times out that way. And Ed will have a lot of links and he can add it also to his website if you'd like to.
Right. Now, here's the thing. If you email me with a specific question, because I can't do therapy over the internet, you may not get a direct response back. But what I will attempt to do if I can is I'll make a blog post out of it, and then I'll let you know when the blog post is live, and so you can go to the blog post and get your answer.
Awesome. And I want to thank you again, Ed, for joining me today on Tea Time and sharing the emotions and understanding the emotions and giving me a little bit of my homework too, because I've been jotting down little notes here, and I got a lot from you today. I got the catch the language, catch it and take that back and step back. Take a moment to step back. Life is fast and we're always on the go, go, go. We just got to take a moment. Even if you're having a happy moment, like Ed mentioned earlier in the show, and you're like, well, why would I take a step back? Well, you know what? Sometimes happy moments too, we have to take a step back and say, why am I so excited? Why am I so happy? Right? Because we have to celebrate the good stuff too, not always the hard stuff. So, Ed, any final words before we wrap up your tea time?
Yes, the important thing to keep in mind is that you're building in a new habit and it takes time. So be compassionate with yourself. Give yourself the time and the permission to learn how to master your emotions as tools. Get the information, start asking what instead of why, get the information you need about each of the emotions, and then be assured that you can do this. You can learn to master your emotions as tools so that they work for you and with you, and you can do it.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate everything you've given me today. And I want to thank each and every one of the viewers and listeners out there who have tuned in. I really appreciate your support for each of the tea times. I try to bring different topics and different flavors to the table so that if one tea doesn't resonate, the next one will. So the next tea time that is coming up is July 28th, I believe. Let me just check here. Yes, July 28th at 7 p.m. So it will be an evening tea time, and we will be talking with Terry Brinston about wellness nurturing. It's a 501 nonprofit organization that helps youths. So I'm big on education and saving our younger generation. So you'll want to tune into that tea time as well. And again, Ed, thank you for joining me. And again, if anybody would like to know more about Dr. Emotions, please just reach out. If you can't find him, I will connect you guys. And all the information is on my Facebook page and on Miss Liz's website as well. Ed's Tea Time will be there. So if you want to catch his podcast and you missed it, you can check it out there. It will be on my website as well. So again, thank you, Ed, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for spilling the tea, because we all need a different cup of tea. So again, Ed's tea was about tools. So we all have some tools in our pockets. And Ed, could you repeat what your tea was before we wrap up?
It's think about emotions as tools.
There you go. Think about emotions as tools. And we can all make a difference when we start serving the tea that we are meant to serve, which is us. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you July 28th at 7 p.m. with a new tea, and we will make a difference one cup of tea at a time.